friends, fellow Earthlings, and intrepid explorers of all ages. Welcome to Ask An Astrobiologist, the show that celebrates the science and the scientists involved in our quest to understand the nature of life. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Graham Lau, also known online as the Cosmobiologist, and we're brought to you by SegaNet.org and the NASA Astrobiology Program. Now, as always, before we start the show, we'd love to just send a shout out to all of you out there who are watching live right now on YouTube or watching the video later and adding your comments on YouTube, who are sharing across all the various social medias and email spaces and internet spaces, all of those fun interweb places. This month, I want to give a special shout out to the PCE3 communication crew. PCE3 is a research coordination network from NASA Astrobiology. It stands for Prebiotic Chemistry in Early Earth Environments. This is a group of different scientists at various institutions who are interested in the kinds of chemistry in the early solar system, especially on early Earth, that could have led to life as we know it. Now, for this episode, I'm kind of excited. I have to say it myself since I love planetary science so much. I was just speaking the other day with some young students down in Puerto Rico, and I was showing them some of my meteorites from my own personal collection, and we were talking about the history of the solar system, and that got me even more excited for this month's guest on Ask An Astrobiologist. Today we'll be joined by Dr. Sara Russell, a professor of planetary sciences at the Natural History Museum in London. She's a world expert in meteorites and asteroids, a scientist on NASA's OSIRIS-REx mission. She's part of the upcoming MMX mission from JAXA, which will be going to Mars's moon Phobos. And she's one of the lucky few on the planet to have an asteroid named after her. So we'll be talking about her experiences in Antarctica collecting meteorites and elsewhere on the Earth, her work with asteroid Bennu, and what we're learning right now about the early solar system from things like meteorites and sample return missions. So Dr. Russell, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me, Graham.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you on. Like I said, I'm super excited. I love planetary science. I love meteorites. I have a meteorite ring myself. My wife and I both have the same piece of rock on our fingers, which is pretty cool. And so I'm so excited to chat everything meteorite. I know they're awesome, right? It makes for great jewelry, way better than diamonds, you know. Now, with all of my guests, the first thing I like to do, since we have sometimes younger people or early career people who they want to know how they can get involved in the realm of astrobiology or planetary science, astrophysics, and these kinds of things. They love to hear how others got here, and so I'd love to know what your origin story was that got you interested in rocks from space and becoming a planetary scientist.
Yeah, well, it started when I was a kid. So I had two main hobbies when I was a kid. One was rocks. So I would pick up rocks on the beach whenever we went on holiday to somewhere there's exposed rocks. And I'd get this big collection that I kept in my bedroom, and my mum would periodically throw away, and I'd have to start again. And my other hobby was looking at space missions. So I used to love following the NASA space missions. And I'm old enough that I can remember the later Apollo missions and the Viking missions to Mars. And I would just kind of devour anything I could learn about these. So that's kind of what got me interested in this field in the first place.
And that's awesome. I mean, I think, a lot of the folks who join us in the show, they love space missions, but, we often hear from people in planetary science and astrobiology that, they loved looking at rocks. They loved thinking about dinosaurs. They loved going out and seeing wildlife. It's those kind of things that inspire us. Yeah. Now, for yourself, you've traveled quite extensively in our world to look for meteorites. We did ask a poll of our audience before we started the show to see if they could go online and do a little sleuthing about your history, to see that you've been to Antarctica on 3 different trips for ANSMET. I'm wondering if you can speak to that experience of what it was like to travel to the southernmost parts of our planet to search for those rocks from space.
Yeah, well, Antarctica is actually the best place in the world to look for meteorites. So meteorites can land anywhere around in the globe, but in certain parts of the world, they are preserved better. So they stay on the surface for a long time, and they can accumulate and makes it easier for you to go and find them. And the good places to look for meteorites include hot deserts, where it's so dry that they don't rust and crumble away. But the very best place is Antarctica, and that's because it's a desert. It's also very cold, acts as a big deep freeze. It's also a big white sheet, so it's easier to see these dark rocks on the surface. And also we think the glaciers actually move the meteorites and kind of dump them in certain places, like a carousel kind of moving things and dumping them. So there are certain places in Antarctica where they're really highly concentrated. So those are the target areas that meteorite trips go for. And it's just it's an incredible experience to go to Antarctica. So I went with the ANSMET expedition, which is an American-led expedition that goes down there every year in their summer and our winter. And we have to camp out in the deepest, darkest parts of the continent. I say darkest, it's actually light all the time. The sun never sets at that time of year. And then during the daytime, we go out and search for meteorites. And, it's just the most unbelievable fun. It's like an Easter egg hunt every day. You're sort of going out, you're trying to search for these precious little rocks, and then you get so excited whenever you find one. It's just an amazing experience and such a privileged experience because so few people actually get to go to that continent.
Yeah, it's incredible. And you've traveled elsewhere. I've seen like the Sahara and Australia, Namibia and Chile and other places on our planet to search for meteorites.
Absolutely. So Antarctica's great, but it's obviously logistically quite hard to get to Antarctica. It's much easier to go to these other hot deserts, to go to the hot deserts instead to search for meteorites there. And so these are also incredible experiences, all so different to each other. So, in some places like Australia, they're very civilized with their meteorite searches. They have a fridge with beer in it for the end of the day. Whereas in the Sahara, it was much kind of tougher to kind of traveling. And we had to remember to take all of our food and water that we'd need for weeks and weeks out in the field with us. It's a fantastic way to sort of see these different cultural experiences as well, and to find meteorites from all over the world.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you're also involved in these missions to bring samples back from space. So we have rocks from space that crash into our planet, but we can also go out and gather rocks in other places. So we've had like Hayabusa 2 from JAXA has returned samples from Ryugu, and you're the deputy mission sample scientist for OSIRIS-REx, the mission that's brought samples back from Bennu. Can you speak to us just like what makes Bennu so scientifically interesting that we brought samples back in the first place?
Yeah, so, I've been talking to you about doing fieldwork to search for meteorites, and fieldwork is, a really super fun thing. And one of the issues with analyzing meteorites is that you never quite know where it came from. So you don't have that kind of context that a geologist normally has when you analyze a rock. You normally know where it's come from, so you have some clues as to what it might be and what its origins might be, and we don't normally have that for meteorites. And so OSIRIS-REx is kind of like a meteoriticist field trip. So we go out and we got the chance to have a look at an asteroidal body and survey it for 2 years before collecting a piece from the surface and bring it back to Earth. And that gave us this huge amount of context. And asteroid Bennu was chosen for several reasons. So it's what's called a near-Earth asteroid, which means, firstly, it's easier to get to and to come back from. But also, these asteroids are really interesting because these are the asteroids that may potentially pose a hazard to the Earth. And so we wanted to know a little bit more in detail about how these asteroids move and orbit around the sun, so we can make our asteroid hazard prediction a bit better in the future. And then the other reason we chose Bennu is because it's what's called a C-type asteroid. So C stands for carbon. We thought it might be rich in organic material and water as well. And we particularly wanted to target that sort of asteroid because we thought that these sort of asteroids may provide clues as to what the early solar system was like, but also what kind of material was impacting the Earth in its very earliest history and may have been contributing to producing this habitable world that we now live on.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Now, the mission itself has been incredible. We brought the samples back now. They're being analyzed and shared by scientists. We're learning a lot of cool things from them that I love to talk about. But first, I think one favorite moment from the mission that a lot of people have, and they've seen the images and the video from it, is the planetary boop, the tag sound collection of the material and how just incredible that was for the imagery. Can you just share for the team and for yourself what it was like in that moment of touching the surface of Bennu?
Yeah, so there were 3 kind of terrifying moments in this mission. It was when it launched, was always a high risk time. When it came back to Earth, also always a high risk time. But then the third terrifying moment was when it came to the surface of Bennu to collect the sample. So this was after really kind of surveying the surface of the asteroid in a great detail. The sample site selection was made to decide where to collect our sample, where it would be safe to collect it, and where also we thought there'd be a really interesting sample brought back to Earth. And the actual touchdown only took a few seconds, but the arm came down to the surface of the asteroid quite slowly, about the speed of a baby crawling, just like really gently coming down to the surface. And then in all of our tests of this process, so of course we'd rehearsed it several times, we assumed that it would be a solid surface, a flat surface, but it turned out for Bennu that was not the case at all. It was like a ball pit, and the tag SAM, which is the sampling arm, just went straight through the surface. And it was only when little boosters of gas activated that it actually managed to escape back out of Bennu to get the sample. But it was a hairy moment for all of us.
Yeah, I imagine so. I mean, it's just in my head, when you mentioned ball pit, I just imagine like a young kid being tossed into a ball pit and just disappearing into the bars. It's pretty incredible. Yeah. And Bennu itself is something that brings to mind this idea of like it being basically a pile of rubble kind of in space, a bunch of rocks that are kind of aggregated due to gravity. And that really kind of challenges how we think about gravity. We're on a large solid planet. We feel ourselves kind of, buoyed to the surface. We can walk around. But, out in space, it's a little different. And Bennu is very much like a big pile of rubble, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was another surprise because, and maybe because, as you say, we're kind of prejudiced. We have this idea of what a solid body is like because we live on this planet that has got this substantial amount of gravity. But Bennu itself is actually, just this cluster of rubble that is so loosely stuck together from its own very gentle gravity. So it's not kind of a solid surface at all.
Yeah, it's incredible. And now you did mention that Bennu is a C-type asteroid. It's very similar to like carbonaceous chondrites that we have. We thought maybe it would have a lot of organic carbon. It turns out it does from a recent paper. Mm-hmm. We've also discovered salts, and then just exploring the geology of the materials we brought back. Can you walk us through what the results so far are telling us about the early solar system?
Yeah, so we got the sample back. We've got about 120 grams back. So this makes it the biggest sample return mission that NASA has had since Apollo. So it's a really kind of important collection of samples. And what we saw straight away was that it's full of water. So the main mineral in there is a clay mineral that traps water in its structure. So it's hosting loads of water. It also has a huge amount of carbon. It has several % carbon in it. And it's full, as you said, of organic molecules. So not biological molecules, but organic molecules that may have been kind of important to as an ingredient for life. And then what we found as well, which was kind of surprising, were these salts. So we found lots of sodium-bearing salts, such as halite, which is table salt, and we also found sodium carbonate. And these are things that are very, very soluble. If you put them in, water, they would immediately just dissolve. And that shows how important it was to have this sample return mission, because if things like that are in meteorites, and they probably were, they just get destroyed so easily as it comes into contact with the Earth's surface. But the salts really give us this fantastic clue about the geological history of Bennu. So it tells us that there were actually once pods of water within Bennu's parent body, probably just kind of room temperature, but really salty water. And this would have been a fantastic place for organic chemical reactions to occur. So our colleagues working on the organic side of things have found an incredible array of organic molecules, including amino acids and nuclear bases. And then my colleagues who I work on the mineralogy side, so we found all of these salts, we found phosphates, and these are all really important ingredients of life and also important catalysts to produce new organic reactions. So we're so super excited, and we feel like we really lucked out. We found this fantastic asteroid that's full of surprises, and also the fantastic thing about having the sample now on Earth is we're really only beginning our analysis of it. But now this rock is going to be around for centuries to come, for our children and their children to be able to analyze, to think of their own scientific questions that they want answered using techniques that we haven't invented yet. And this sort of mission is really a gift that keeps on giving.
I love that view for the future of, we now have these samples for many years to come. I recall in graduate school, my one office mate, she had some rocks from Apollo that had never been analyzed before. And she was analyzing them in the laboratory and learning more, many, many years after they were collected. And so I think that's beautiful to think about, people watching right now. Maybe we have a high school student or a young person watching right now who in the not too distant future might want to be a scientist and work on those samples too. Also, just thinking about, these little possible like warm, salty ponds in the early solar system kind of extends that vision of Charles Darwin a little bit into prebiotic chemistry as well, of thinking of what might have been the beginning for prebiotic chemistry in our solar system.
Absolutely. And there's nothing particularly special about Bennu as an asteroid. So if this is happening on Bennu, it was probably happening throughout our solar system, or at least in the outermost part of the solar system, where there would have been abundant ices and volatile materials. So this is not a kind of a rare thing at all. Probably these conditions were everywhere, and asteroids like Bennu would have impacted the early Earth, but also impacted Mars and all the other bodies in our solar system as well, distributing these ingredients for life.
Yeah, it's incredible. I do want to talk a little bit also about MMX, this Martian Moons Exploration mission that's coming up from JAXA. I think it's currently slated for 2026 launch still. I'd love to hear your vision for this mission and what it's going to do at Phobos.
Yeah, so this is the next small body sample return mission. It's going to go to Phobos, which is Mars's largest moon, still tiny compared to our moon. It's only 20 kilometers across. But Phobos is really close to the Martian surface, much closer than our moon is to the Earth. And we think that there might be fragments of actual bits of Mars that have been planted into Phobos through impacts that happen onto the Martian surface, kind of sputtering bits off. So we hope that these samples that will be brought back from Phobos will not only tell us about Phobos, but may also contain Martian material as well. But Phobos is a really interesting target in its own right because it's a great mystery how Phobos formed. So Phobos looks a lot like an asteroid. Spectrally, it looks dark. It just has a look of an asteroid. But its orbit around Mars is almost exactly circular and around the equator. And that's kind of very unusual for an asteroid that's just been captured by the gravity of a planet. So we don't quite understand how it formed. It might be a captured asteroid that just happened to get into this very specific orbit. Or maybe it formed when there was a big collision into the surface of Mars that spewed bits up that then formed Phobos. But it would be really so interesting to find out. There's only 3 moons in the inner solar system. There's our moon, and then there's the 2 tiny moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos. And so finding out how they formed will really kind of help us better understand the workings of our part of the solar system.
I love that so much. There's so much more to discover about our own solar system and its history and these various bodies that we have. And sample return is becoming a big part of that. We've had samples, from our moon. Obviously, we've had samples from various other objects, including missions like OSIRIS-REx and Hayabusa 2 and upcoming MMX, maybe even possible Mars sample return from the surface of Mars in the future. And it feels kind of like we're still kind of entering this golden age, perhaps, for return missions, bringing samples back to Earth. What do you think of the future? What is the future in your vision for bringing materials to Earth to better understand the cosmos?
Yes, absolutely. So I agree with you. I think and hope that we are entering this kind of golden age where we'll bring samples from all over the solar system back to Earth. And if we do that, there's so much more science that we can do if we can use the labs that are on Earth. So we have facilities like synchrotrons, for example, that are kind of, a kilometer in diameter. We could never kind of launch one of those in a space mission, but we can analyze rocks brought back by missions using those kind of facilities. There's loads of stuff that we can do with a sample back on Earth that is really going to kind of accelerate our understanding of our solar system and help us learn where to go next as well and what we can do with these samples.
Yeah. I love that. I personally have worked at synchrotrons at 3 of them on the planet, and it really is fun work. But yeah, you're right. They're humongous instruments. And it'd be just, not in our current understanding of physics to build a small enough benchtop particle accelerator to take that into space to sample things. And so we do have high resolution instruments here on Earth to do that work with. I do want to get to our faster than light segment and also bring in our audience to ask their questions through me. But first off, in our previous conversation, getting ready for the show, you mentioned that when you're not working on rocks from space, you enjoy hiking, especially in the Scottish Highlands. So for you, what draws you to earthly landscapes?
Yeah, so I guess the field work that I've done looking for meteorites is kind of part of my love of traveling and exploring and looking at our own planet. And I think we still have so much to learn about the Earth. And Scotland is one of my favourite places to go with my family. We go there every single year and we hike around, and there's this fantastic feeling you get when you climb a Munro, which is what they call the mountains in Scotland. When you get to the top, you kind of feel that you're really on top of the world, and it really kind of blows the cobwebs away and helps you stop thinking about work for a little bit and just kind of enjoy being where you are. So it's a really kind of fun way to learn about the rest of our Earth as well, to go out and hike around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I live in Colorado. I love the mountains. I love hiking in the mountains. I do miss oceans, but it is nice to go out hiking and see things from different perspectives. So for our audience who are watching live, do feel free to keep asking your questions in the chat, and we'll get those into the queue for me. But first, Sarah, we have our Faster Than Light segment. These are questions we ask of everyone who comes on the show, just to see the range of answers from various astrobiologists and planetary scientists and philosophers and everyone else who joins us. And so my first question for you comes from something that I've always been thinking about when it comes to life living here on our planet and all the remarkable things that it does. What is your favorite thing that life on Earth does?
Oh, I think my favorite thing that life on Earth does has got to be explore. So I think, all life has this sort of ability to learn and explore, but humans especially, and we've now developed this ability to actually go beyond our planet to find out what's in our solar system. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and that absolutely. I think this idea from Carl Sagan, right, that we are the cosmos coming to know itself, is just remarkable that we've had this ability to go out and look.
Right.
And like I mentioned earlier at the start of the show, I was speaking to some young women in Puerto Rico the other day, and it was just cool talking to them about the potential for maybe alien life out there to be doing the same thing, to also be asking questions and exploring its own star system to learn more. Now,
absolutely.
My next question is a fun one. And I've had a lot of different answers. So if you could communicate with any non-human organism on the Earth, what would it be and what would you want to talk about?
Right. Okay. So my kind of gut reaction to this question is to say I would like to tell my cat not to wake me up in the night, and that's the main communication I'd like to make to a non-human organism. But also, I was thinking about this question, and I would like to be able to talk to a tree, because you kind of know what most mammals at least are thinking, but a tree, who knows? And if you talk to a really old tree, it would have experienced thousands of years of the world changing and observed humans becoming ever more sophisticated. So it would be good to get that sort of long perspective.
Yeah, I love that so much. There's a bristlecone pine here in the USA called Methuselah that's been around for over 5,000 years with our best
Oh,
estimates
wow.
right now, which is before the Great Pyramids in Egypt were built at Gaza or Giza. But when woolly mammoths were still walking the earth, this tree was born into the world, and so that is very incredible to think about.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's exactly who I'd like to talk to.
Too. Now, a lot of us are inspired by science fiction and fantasy, but also other stories. I love video games and movies. What stories have inspired you to want to learn more about life in the universe?
Well, the story that inspired me has got to be Doctor Who. So I don't know if you're familiar with Doctor Who. It's a very popular TV program in the UK that has been going on forever since I was a kid. So I used to watch it. It's about a Time Lord that's basically a benign alien who takes his companions through time and space and shows them different parts of the universe at different times. And yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. So I used to watch it, and my kids watched it too. They're now big fans as well. But that's kind of really kind of got me interested in what might be out there.
Yeah, I love Doctor Who. I grew up watching it on
Okay,
television as
great.
well. It came on
Yes.
public television where I grew up in Pennsylvania. It was Maryland Public
Right.
Television would air Doctor Who, and it was usually like 12 at night or like 1 in the morning. And so I would stay up really late just to watch it and watch these old episodes. Of course, there's a newer rehash of it that also explores really fun stories. For me as an astrobiologist, one of my favorite, there's like a giant space whale creature that's being used for resources.
Yes.
And so it plays out like a very fun ethical question
Yes.
of how we approach
Absolutely.
other creatures on our Earth and potentially out there in the cosmos. So I love that so much.
Yeah, it often does cover these big questions. Yeah, so yeah, it's a great show.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it myself. And it inspired my career and the things that I've done in my own
Mhm.
life. And so my next question is a career focused question for you. If you could go back and visit yourself at the start of your career, what advice would you give to yourself?
I think the advice I would give to myself or any young scientist or young person actually is that with your career, you've got to follow your heart. And this is sort of what I did, but I was very worried about whether I was doing the right thing all the time. So I think it's really important to follow where your passions take you. And yeah, many times in my early career, I had a choice between kind of going through the graduate school route, which, as you know, Graham, is there's a lot of uncertainty. You never know where your next contract's coming if you're a postdoc. So there's a lot of kind of practical things to work out if you go down the academic route. But I was really glad that I chose that rather than a safer but more boring career. So I think I would advise myself to do that, and also just to always take any opportunities that are presented to you, because you regret not doing things, but you very rarely regret things that you've done.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. In my own life, I've had options that I selected not to go after because I wanted to learn so much more in science and astrobiology and share this beautiful world of astrobiology with others who are out there. And so I love this idea of following your heart. I mean, we can do things realistically to make money
Hmm.
and to survive, but
Yeah.
we also should enjoy at the end of the day what we're doing.
Yes, completely agree.
So we spoke a little bit about this possible golden age of sample return and some ideas for what we might learn in the future. I love your vision for how like the samples from Bennu, for instance, will be around for for many, many years to come for other people in the future to work with, maybe with new paradigms of science in geology or physics or chemistry or even biology. But more generally, what is something that excites you about the future?
Mm. Well, I think, as we said, this idea of going into this golden age of sample return is something that's so exciting. And I work at a natural history museum, the Natural History Museum in London, and our museum's full of these samples that have been collected over the centuries. So we have eggs that were collected by Charles Darwin, and we have rocks that were collected by Ernst Shackleton when he was exploring Antarctica. Kind of this huge kind of resource of different collections from our planet. And what I kind of hope for the future is that in centuries to come, our descendants will be taking their kids around museums where they can see, the first rock brought back from the Martian surface, or the first bug that was found in Europa. And hopefully be a bit more kind of thoughtful about any ethical issues of collecting stuff from all over the place. But however, having this amazing resource that I hope will both inspire young people, but also can be used to address scientific questions. So, as another example, the collections that were brought back in the 17th century that are now in the museum, there are plants that were brought back then, which are now used to look at how biodiversity has changed over the last 100 years or so. And of course, that's a question that the scientists that brought these to the museum would not have even thought about. It wouldn't be on their radar at all. And in the same way, I hope that the sample from Bennu and all of the other exciting missions that are going to bring back materials will also be used for things that we haven't even thought about yet.
Yeah, I love that so much. I mean, there's libraries and museums, these repositories of human knowledge that we've collected through time, and the view that we sometimes are collecting things that might be useful in new ways in the future is really cool to think about. Now, you did mention earlier this idea of you followed your passions. You're doing incredible work in planetary science. You've touched the oldest rocks on the planet and now samples from other worlds in our solar system. But let's say that you could restart your career today. If so, what would you want to study? Would you change anything about what you're studying?
That's a hard one. My first impulse is say no, because I love my career so much. I mean, I get a thrill every day when I touch a rock that's come from space. I work on rocks that are 4.5 billion years old. So they contain this whole history of our solar system. So it would have to be pretty cool to beat that. But I think, if I was just starting my career today, I would either do that or maybe work in exoplanets, which is really another, such an exciting field. And we're just kind of, again, on the cusp of learning so much about what other planets might be out there. So in the solar system, we only have 8 planets to look at and study, but there are actually billions out there that we can potentially learn from over the next decades.
Yeah, I love that so much. So I have one more question in our Faster Than Light segment, and then we'll come to the audience Q&A. We have lots of questions coming in, so lots of fun things to discuss. But first, and lastly in this segment, what's an unbelievable science fact that still blows your mind?
So an unbelievable science fact that still blows my mind as a meteoriticist is that every year there's about 40,000 tons of space rock, mostly in the form of dust, comes down to the Earth. So that means the Earth is actually growing every year. It's getting a little bit bigger from all of these space rocks that are landing on it. But it not only means that, but it means that there's this kind of transport of material between bodies in the solar system. So most of this stuff comes from asteroids, maybe a little bit from comets, but some comes from the moon, some comes from from Mars. Who knows, maybe some comes from other planets as well. So there's this kind of exchange of material around the solar system. And I think that's really amazing. We kind of tend to think of ourselves as this isolated little ball in space, but actually there is material exchanging between the planets.
Yeah, it's cool to think about just this whole history of our solar system, of the early solar system being more chaotic with all these extra bodies kind of crashing into each other. But we've continued this process of planets soaking up materials, materials moving around from world to world. It is very fun just to think of the dynamics of our solar system.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you said, so in the beginning of the solar system, there would have been so much more of this kind of exchange. The solar system would have been a much more chaotic place. Now it's much more settled. But even now, the Earth still gets these kind of little, I like to think of them as little gifts from space every year.
I like that. That's so much fun to think about. So I'm going to come to our audience questions now. We have 2 that came in just before the show, and then we have several that are coming in right now via YouTube from those who are watching live. The first question is from Dr. Jim Pass. Jim is an astrosociologist, and he's always curious about how we can connect astrobiology to society here on Earth. And so his question is, how is the study of the early history of our solar system, including our focus on things like Bennu and our moon, how is that relevant to societies on Earth today, in your view?
Oh, well, I think Bennu is telling us about our origins, and I think this is something that everybody's curious about. So every culture on Earth has ideas and stories about our origins, but we're kind of really learning about how we grew from being a kind of very hot and inhospitable place during the Hadean era to being this kind of beautiful, habitable world that we see today. And it's also kind of telling us, I think, something more universal about the solar system, that's these lovely prebiotic things would have landed on other planets and moons as well, and may have helped make them habitable. So I think, to me, it sort of suggests that it increases the probability that there may be life on other bodies in our solar system as well. But we still, obviously we have to find that out. But I think these are sociological questions. I don't know if that answers the question, but these are questions that I think are interesting to all of humanity.
Yeah, I agree. I think it connects us to our past. It connects us to our future as well, in very, very interesting ways for society to better understand our fate, where we come from. And I have another question that came in just before the show from AC, who's watching live right now as well, about that early history of our solar system, the history we want to know about. A lot of us have debated in geology and planetary science on where Earth got its water from, whether or not it came from the materials that aggregated and made our planet, or if it was delivered exogenously afterwards from comets or asteroids. And AC wants to know why it seems like maybe wet asteroids were the more likely source for water for Earth than comets.
Mm-hmm. Well, I should start off by saying this is still quite a highly debated subject, so we still don't really know for sure. I think it's likely that when the Earth formed, it was quite hot when it accreted. It had a lot of heat associated with accretion, and also there was a lot of radioactive decay that would have heated it up, and that would have driven off any primordial water that accreted with it. So it must have come later. And then the question is, did it come from cometary type material, icy bodies, or from asteroids like Bennu? And as far as we can tell, we think, or at least my team thinks, that it's more likely that most of it came from asteroids. And that's because we can measure the ratio of deuterium to hydrogen in water in asteroids, and we also have some values for comets as well. And the asteroids match the Earth much more closely, so they're a better compositional match for the Earth. So that makes us think that probably they were the main supplier of water to the Earth.
Mm. Yeah, it's very intriguing to think about what the history might have been, and it is very, very highly debated still whether or not the water came from out there, and also for prebiotic chemistry whether that came down here. There's also been some people out there who've made claims in the past that that we've discovered life in meteorites and that came from space, so that we've discovered that there's already life out there. Theophilus Kobina Eshin is watching on YouTube. And wants to know why there have been a claim sometime in the past of having found life in Allende, which is a very famous meteorite. I personally hadn't heard of that. I'm not sure if you had, or if you can at least speak to how this happens. Every now and then, someone makes a very bold claim, sometimes backed by good science, but very bold claims about finding signs of life in things like meteorites.
Yes, absolutely. So this does pop up every now and then, and I'm not sure that I'm familiar with the Allende one, but I do know of one reported life in another similar meteorite, Orgay, which is another carbonaceous chondrite. And yeah, so it seems like, well, the bottom line is there's no evidence for life in any meteorite that has been found on Earth. That's the short answer. The longer answer is that quite often meteorites can become contaminated once they reach the Earth. And obviously this is another reason why it's so important to have space missions like OSIRIS-REx that bring back a really pristine sample where it can be curated really, really carefully, and we can really make sure that we eliminate the possibility of that kind of contamination. But any meteorite that's landed on the Earth naturally will immediately get kind of covered with bugs, and worms will crawl over it and all sorts of things. So they get contaminated straight away. And it's become really apparent that even meteorites that are collected very quickly, they still show signs of contamination just by coming through the Earth's atmosphere and having sat on the ground. So there's the contamination issue. And then sometimes, so for example, there was a Martian meteorite called Allen Hills 84001 that was proposed in 1996 that it might contain fossils as well. And that might be just that that the researchers were mistaken that the features they could see could actually be explained by non-biological means. So that can also be the case. So yeah, we need to go on space missions. We need to go to Mars, really, to look for life there. That's how we're going to really find this question. Unfortunately, they don't seem to survive in meteorites.
Yeah, and it's a good question, whether or not we can find signs of life, and the contamination is an issue. You mentioned the Allen Hills meteorite, which was discovered in Antarctica in 1984, and then the paper in 96 came out suggesting signs of life in it, even though that's been very well contested now. It did kind of launch the astrobiology program in ways at NASA.
Absolutely.
And it changed a lot of people's thinking about the possible past histories of Mars. And so, yeah, getting out there is super crucial. But let's say someone's watching right now who maybe wants to go to Antarctica or go on one of these meteorite searching missions. Millie Jane, for instance, who's watching, wants to know what would enable someone to do scientific research in Antarctica and go look for these meteorites. What qualifications might someone need, for instance, to apply for ANSMET?
Yeah, so for ANSMET, they're usually looking for somebody who has a professional interest. So maybe studying meteorites is a great one, obviously, but also they bring down astronauts that want to go to Antarctica as part of their training, because part of it is that you're isolated with a very small number of people for many weeks. So that's, in some ways, that's similar to being in the International Space Station. And they also bring down glaciologists and people who have other kind of scientific interests in being there. So that's the main thing. A fantastic thing about ANSMET, which they've always done, is that they are very inclusive. So it doesn't matter if you're a little bit older, or if you have some like little health issues, or if you're a woman even, they let you go down. And that wasn't true, at least a few decades ago. Many of these teams wouldn't allow women to join them. So shout out to ANSMET for being always from the beginning really, really inclusive.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, on this lines of ANSMET and going to Antarctica, someone watching right now is my good friend Terry Trevino. Much like myself, Terry has traveled to the high Arctic on the other side of the planet. I've personally been to Ellesmere Island, where I did my graduate research, and Terry travels to the Houghton crater in the high Arctic, where there's a Mars analog base there. Terry's wondering why we don't go looking for meteorites in the Arctic as well.
Well, there have been a few expeditions to search for meteorites in the Arctic, but they have not been successful. And the reasons why they weren't successful is not clear, but probably related to the slightly different climate. So perhaps only in the kind of very deep Antarctic interior do you get the super dry conditions that really kind of promote meteorite preservation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, so like where I went, it was a polar desert, but it's also not entirely covered in ice in the high Arctic. At certain points of the year, that ice also changes throughout the year. It's a much different environment. It's not a solid continent the way Antarctica is, and so that's a very good point as well. So let's move away from Antarctica just for a moment. User Rendering Reality 3D Animations has asked if you can describe what the site selection for the MMX mission is like in trying to help us determine both the origin of Phobos and possibly looking for Martian materials. Have we done site selection for that mission? Do we know where it's going already?
No, so we'll decide that when we get to Phobos, and there's a capability in the spacecraft to touch down in two places. So, we're thinking maybe it would be good to sample the Mars side and the far side. So just like the Earth's moon is locked, so there's only one side that's facing the Earth. It's the same for Phobos. There's one side that's locked facing Mars. So the Mars side would be a particularly exciting place to sample because that's where you're more likely to have Martian material implanted. But we won't know really till we get there. So sample site selection is always a bit of a kind of I'm not going to say fight, but a bit of a discussion between the engineers who want to go to the safest possible landing site and the scientists who want to go to the most fun landing site. Of course the safest one always wins out, but we have to wait till we get there, and until we got some really good maps of the area, and then make that decision.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I think a lot of people, we'll talk about Mars and our landing site selections, and always included in that is the understanding that engineers are going to tell us where the landing ellipse or the landing area can be, and it has to be somewhere where a mission will be safe. Same thing is true for asteroids and moons. The scientists, if we had unlimited funds and ability, we'd go everywhere and sample everything.
So true.
We just can't do that, can we?
Not yet.
So Pia has asked, so considering the salts we found, these sodium salts that we discovered on Bennu, we've discovered salts in various other places in our solar system, but also Earth has a history of salt. Pia wants to know, from your perspective, what salt itself on a planet tells us about geological history.
Yeah, so it tells us, it basically points to water. So on Earth, salt deposits are generally found in what's called evaporite. So they are perhaps old lakes where the water has evaporated away and left a residue of salts. And our kind of analog site for Bennu was a place in California called Searles Lake, which is an incredibly well-studied salty area because it's actually used for mining, so it's used economically, and therefore has been studied really closely. And so it tells us that there was water, and whereas kind of salt deposits on Earth are actually fairly a rare thing, the fact that we find them on Bennu might imply that they are more abundant in these water-bearing asteroids. And we see evidence that Enceladus has got streams of material coming out that looks like a brine, and Ceres has got deposits on it that look like evaporites as well. So that's telling us that these are potentially widespread processes across the solar system. So when we think about the geology, we shouldn't just think about the silicates. We also need to think about all of these water-associated minerals as well. They might be telling a really important story, and even more so for rocks that originate in the outermost solar system. Maybe one thing that I should have mentioned is that although Bennu is close to the Earth now, it's a near-Earth orbit, its parent body comes from much further out in the solar system. So it probably formed beyond what we call the snow line, where there was ice present as well. And that's the source of the water that it now has in its clay minerals.
Oh, it's a fantastic point because it leads to our next question. Anirudh Mahanti, who's watching and is also one of our production assistants, wants to know if you would be interested in going to the outer solar system to study rocks out there. Of course, we have comets, but there's also asteroidal bodies in the outer solar system, and maybe even some worlds that we haven't even quite explored yet, much further away from our sun. How do you think we should go about exploring those objects and understanding them as well?
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, I would love to go out and explore the outer solar system, especially if it was a sample return mission, of course. Like if we could collect a sample and bring it back to Earth, that would be amazing. Just looking, it'd be great to get a piece of Io, for example, or Europa. I'd love to get one of the icy moons and try and bring that back to Earth. And I'm sure that would just open up a whole new world for us. And there's so much to learn. And yeah, it'd be incredible. And rocks like Bennu, we infer that they come from the outermost part of the solar system, but we don't know exactly where, and we don't know how far out. And being able to actually go out and sample these outer solar system bodies would give us a much better perspective on that, I think.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, there's so much more to explore and to learn.
Yes. So
Now,
much, yeah.
with our exploration, our next two questions have to do with the processes of your work. First off, Anthony Chan, who's watching and is also a production assistant today, thank you, Anthony, wants to know what kind of instruments you've used to help you find meteorites, and I'll add in as well, what kind of instruments you've used to study meteorites.
Yeah, so for finding meteorites, when we're out on a meteorite hunt, we only use our eyes. So there are some meteorite hunters who use metal detectors because most meteorites can contain quite significant amounts of metal and they set off a metal detector. But in all the meteorite hunts that I've been on, we haven't done that. And that's because we think it's more important to have our eyes open to just seeing something that looks odd, that doesn't belong in that place, because those might be the most interesting meteorites of all. So meteorites from the moon and from Mars, for example, they tend to not have these magnetic minerals in them. So we would miss those if we used those kind of instruments. So yeah, the human eye is the best instrument for finding meteorites. And then when we get them back in the lab, so my team uses a suite of mineralogical instruments. So we have an electron microscopes that we use, and we also use CT scanning, which just like a medical CT scan, it sort of shows you what it's like on the inside. And we use X-ray diffraction, which tells us what minerals are present in the rock as well. So those are the main tools that I use personally. And yeah, also I go to synchrotrons like you, Graham, and that gives us a chance often to look in much higher resolution at what the composition of the meteorite is. So sort of paradoxically, the sort of biggest instrument of all is actually used to look at the tiniest crystal that we can. So.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I love synchrotron environments just because the science is so remarkable
so fun.
Of all the different things they're doing in material science and geology and biological materials and all of these cool things going on. And there's also all the physics going on at these high energy facilities.
They're such exciting places to be, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Now, with your research, currently there's a lot going on, a lot of change in society because of artificial intelligence. It's changing a lot of things in how we use our technologies, like our smartphones and our computers. It's changing how people create and how they write. We have a user, IK, who wants to know if you expect or how you expect AI to help you or maybe impact your research maybe in the next 10 years.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So, yeah, I'm sure it will is the question is the answer. And I am very far from being an AI expert. So I don't know exactly, but there are projects, for example, to pool all of the data that we have for meteorites. So often the data is quite complicated because there's data about meteorites from lots of different techniques, and also if you look at a meteorite that's similar to Bennu, it's made up of components that all formed 4.5 billion years ago or earlier. So it's kind of this mishmash of things that each have their own history. And if we could, there's a potential, I think, to use AI to plug all that in to look for patterns that we just can't see if we're looking at it on this kind of human scale of trying to answer one question at a time. So there's a huge potential, I think, for using AI in my field, in meteoritics, but also in planetary science more generally.
Yeah, it's going to change so much, and it already is changing a lot. But for a lot of astrobiology research, planetary science research, a lot of research, it's going to change a lot of things.
For sure. Yeah.
Now we have a question from user BrainRot777 on YouTube. They have a question you may or may not wish to answer. That is, what is the origin of life? That idea that you think is the most right, and they also want to know about panspermia. I will mention, so this idea of panspermia or seeds everywhere is not an origin of life hypothesis. Panspermia is an idea of life transitioning between planets, between worlds, forming, perhaps originating in one world and transferring to another one. But Sarah, for you, do you have like a pet favorite idea of maybe where life started?
Well, to be honest, I don't have a pet theory, but I will say one thing that maybe not that slightly puzzles me, which is that on Bennu we have all of these ingredients. We've got nuclear bases. We also have. Oh, excuse me. On Bennu, we've got nuclear bases, we also got sugars, and we've got phosphates, we've got amino acids. We basically have really, really all the ingredients for life. And yet we don't have any evidence that life actually started on Bennu or its parent body, which would have been a bit bigger. And that begs the question of why not? So I don't know why life did not start on Bennu. Maybe the body was too small, maybe it was being irradiated too much because it was airless. But I think that tells us that maybe you need something bigger, you need a planet, and you need some source of the nutrients, like the asteroids like Bennu impacting the source to provide these nutrients, because I don't think they would have been there to start with. And then it must have happened on the planetary body.
Yeah, and there's so much we don't know yet. We don't know, and we may never know how life first came to Earth or first started on the Earth, because geologically we've lost a lot of that early rock. Our Earth is dynamic, and it cycles the rocks around and recycles them through plate tectonics and subduction. And there's only a few places with very, very old rock, and most of those rocks are just broken down pieces of mineral that got trapped in much younger rocks. But say, that evolution happens, an origination event happens on another world and evolution occurs. Pia is curious to know our views on evolution occurring on an alien world. I'll add in for myself first, because I think about this fairly often, that there is a chance that if life originated on another world, say in another star system, on an Earth-like planet, or maybe a very different planet, that life might diverge drastically from life as we know it. Alien life could be truly alien, so much so that maybe with the current tools and the scientific techniques that we're using, we're not quite looking in the right way just yet. However, all of that said, so earlier, Sarah mentioned that if she could speak to any creature on the planet, it might be a tree, because trees can be very old. But there's also a fun thing in evolution called convergence. And so convergent processes in evolution, they drive life to sometimes do the same things over and over again separately. And this could be metabolisms for microbes on the alien world being similar to our metabolisms, maybe building cells, maybe even using RNA and DNA. But it could also be things like making trees. And so in the realm of plant life, there's a lot of different plants that evolved the process of tree separately through convergent processes. And so I often wonder, could there be alien trees out there? Because at the end of the day, what a tree is, it's a plant that's trying to get closer to starlight, to gather more of the starlight to grow itself. And so maybe there are alien trees out there like we see in some science fiction. But Sarah, for you, I guess a fun question might be, like, how do you envision evolution being different or the same on the alien world?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, Graham. And honestly, I don't know, but I think we've got so much to find out. I mean, I would really like to know. I think thought about this more than me. Do you think that life has to use water, for example, or is there another way that life can work without water?
Yeah, it's such a fun question. I actually have a whole lecture I give sometimes in astrobiology courses about life as we know it being carbon-based and water-based. But there are other possibilities for solvents and for different backbones for life. But I personally think, given how incredible water is, being a liquid has such a huge range of temperatures and pressures, that water is actually a pretty good solvent for alien life as well.
Yeah, and also another thing about water is that it's incredibly abundant. So, obviously hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and it's the oxide of hydrogen. It's going to be everywhere. So it does make sense that life would take advantage of that.
Absolutely. I love sci-fi, and it always irks me when there's a science fiction alien who comes to invade Earth for our water, because if you come to our solar system and you want water, Earth is not the place to go. We don't have much water compared to like Europa. Europa has way more water. Titan's full of water. The gas giants have lots of water. And so, there's better places to go. So this has been just a remarkable conversation, Sarah. I have one more question because I think it's a really fun one from Carbon-Based Life Form. They want to know what your favorite part is about working at the museum.
Oh, wow. I love working at the museum. I mean, it has to be because of our collection. So we have 80 million different things at our museum. And working there, I've learned about anthropology, I've learned about insects, I've learned about all sorts of things about ancient trees that I absolutely wouldn't not know otherwise. So yeah, museums just a fantastic fun place to work. You learn new things every day.
That's fantastical. I will say, so the Natural History Museum has a new exhibit coming out starting the 16th of May of this year. It's called Space, Could Life Exist Beyond Earth? And it'll be, to my knowledge, Sarah, it's going to be relevant to astrobiology and materials from space, and it might be really fun to go check out, right?
Yes, absolutely. So it's aimed at families, and we're going to cover our work on Bennu, but we're also going to talk about Mars. We're going to talk about icy moons. We're going to talk about whether there might be life on exoplanets. It should be a really fun exhibition. So I hope everyone can come and see it.
Absolutely. I hope I can as well. So Dr. Russell, thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting with you about your career and your research, asteroids and meteorites and planetary science and all of this incredible stuff.
Great. Thank you so much, Graham. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you. And to our audience, thank you all, as always, for your incredible questions and your continued support of our show, and just for tuning in and joining us in this remarkable journey. For those who are watching who want to stay in the loop on upcoming episodes of our show, as well as learn about upcoming events and opportunities through NASA Astrobiology Program, you can use the link on your screen right now to sign up for the official mailing list from NASA's Astrobiology Program. To Dr. Russell, a huge thank you. To everyone watching, a huge thank you. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And until next time, stay curious.